Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. Okay, so I have been able to check out some new footage of Yuffie's all new chapter in the Final Fantasy VII Remake update, which is coming to PlayStation 5. I believe it is just exclusive to PS5, isn't it? At least at the moment. So I've been able to check some of that out and I am so incredibly excited to actually play this now. In this video, I'm going to highlight 3 things that I am looking forward to the absolute most. But as a bonus chapter, it looks all round so good to me at the moment. I'm really excited for this. I wanted to quickly mention first up that a big part of the reason that I'm looking forward to this so much is because I am such a big fan of the Final Fantasy VII Remake itself, and I just can't wait to get back into it. I was actually one of the people that was very unsure about what to expect going into the game, because I had no idea how Square Enix was going to be able to handle the heritage of one of the most beloved games of all time. As it turns out, the approach they took was to tear the game right down to its very core and essence and subvert everything in the process. It's still Final Fantasy VII as a basic plot thread, but in so many ways it is making the exact opposite theoretical and philosophical points. That takes real creative vision. I think that was the right thing for them to do. I just didn't expect Square Enix to do that, so it really impressed me when I first played it. I haven't played the game since, it's just the one playthrough at this stage, but I'm certainly looking forward to the Yuffie chapter giving me an excuse to get back into it. Which brings me back to Yuffie. I wasn't a huge fan of Yuffie in the original Final Fantasy VII. In fact, I wasn't a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII as a whole thing. I've become a much bigger fan after playing the remake, but Yuffie in particular was not my favourite character. But since the remake has already shattered my expectations in so many ways about this game, I'm now fully expecting that Yuffie's chapter will do so as well and will turn me around on the character completely. So with that as a kind of introduction, here are the 3 things that have got me most excited about this new chapter. Okay, so perhaps most obviously, let's talk about Yuffie herself. I love this character model and her characterization in the footage that we've seen so far. I absolutely love her. I've always liked the perky type girl in my Final Fantasy games, so Selphie from Final Fantasy VIII may have been my first waifu, I think. From memory anyway, she was the first character that I found myself really enjoying on that level. I crushed and really hard on Riku in Final Fantasy X, and while I know she's one of the most disliked characters in the entire series, Vanille from Final Fantasy XIII is just, she was just, oh my god, that Vanille was, I really liked Vanille. So anyway, Yuffie looks like she's cut from much the same cloth as the other characters in this chapter. She's bright and cheerful, she's a little bit nonsense, what with that Moogle costume that she's wearing, and whenever she's around she seems to be like this comic relief thing. So a lot of her scenes have a sense of humour that Final Fantasy VII Remake itself didn't have too much of. It had a little bit, but it seems to be a much higher concentration in this Yuffie chapter. It seems to be quite light and bubbly and a lot of good fun times. And that is very much like Riku, Selphie and Vanille were. Whenever they were in scenes, whenever they led the scenes, they tended to be the scenes that were the kind of light versions of their respective games. So she's also got a bit of light fan service going for her, what with those super short shorts being unbuttoned and all. I do like that aesthetic. And given what happened to my best girl Jessie from Final Fantasy VII Remake proper, I needed Yuffie to come in and be the way she is for the fan service side of the games, because Final Fantasy series always has a little bit of fan service in it, and that's part of its charm as a series, without it going so over the top that it's going to put people off. And I think that Square Enix has done a good job with the balancing act here. Yuffie is a little bit fan servicey, just like Riku and Vanille and Selphie were, without it being uncomfortably so for people who aren't into their fan service. So for all of that, I'm very much looking forward to this I'm very much looking forward to this chapter for the main character, because for a game and series as character-driven as Final Fantasy is, that means a lot, and I think this chapter is going to deliver that and bring that character into the rest of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which gets me excited for what comes after it, with the next proper Final Fantasy VII Remake game to come. So secondly, I cannot wait to get my hands on this minigame that they're adding to this chapter. It's called Fort Condor, and they're framing it as this tactical strategy little thing. Now, from the limited amount of footage that you are seeing on the screen, and really that's all I've seen as well, it looks like it's a bit inspired by Clash of Clans and those kinds of mobile games, only it has Square Enix's usual visual polish and level of design, and of course it'll be free of microtransactions and all those other things that tend to ruin mobile games. As we all know, where Square Enix nails a Final Fantasy minigame, they really nail it, and it becomes a thing that is worth playing as a standalone experience. Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII was so influential that to this day it's inspiring game developers with their minigames. Bravely Default 2 was released earlier this year, and it has a minigame in it that is directly and explicitly inspired by Triple Triad. Final Fantasy X, meanwhile, has a Blitzball minigame, and that hasn't proven to be so influential for whatever reason, but it is one of those things that people who love Final Fantasy X end up spending an obscene amount of time playing. It was deep for a minigame, and you could spend many hours just making your way to the top of that minigame experience. Now, Final Fantasy VII Remake lacked the iconic Final Fantasy minigame thing. It had some excellent little side things that you could do, don't get me wrong. For memory, my favourite one that I always think of is the little rhythm game that was there for one scene in the game. It was brilliant, and I wish Square Enix would turn that into a full Final Fantasy rhythm game thing. But it didn't have the kind of extended and deep experience that Fort Condor looks like it will fill in, and it'll give that Final Fantasy VII Remake the mini-game that will become associated with it. Of course, we'll have to wait and see if it is as good and substantial as it looks like it could be. We don't know yet. It might turn out to be terrible, of course. But the footage that we see here, while it's not enough to gauge the extent and depth of it, I do think there's enough there to get excited for it. And there is plenty of potential there for Fort Condor to become a big thing to Final Fantasy VII Remake as a whole, beyond even just the Yuffie chapter. Finally, there's the music. Final Fantasy games have always had incredible music, of course, everybody knows that. But the little collection of clips that we have here show that Yuffie's chapter is going to have some of the finest music of all, potentially at least. There's everything from J-pop to jazzy numbers and onto some metal. And it looks like the combination of that within this chapter will have a dynamic kind of comic quality that will suit the quest and the task and Yuffie's character herself as well. It looks like it will meet that kind of eclectic, kind of bubbly, perky tone that this chapter seems to be aiming for. And I will shut up now and just let you listen to some of the music, because it really is great, and if this doesn't put you in the mood for some Final Fantasy music, then nothing will.
I'm coming for you, Flyer. Nope, got the wrong cat. Why do you all have to look the same? Gotcha!
And so with that, those are the three big reasons that these few minutes of footage that I've seen have me so excited for Yuffie's chapter in Final Fantasy VII Remake. I generally avoid seeing pre-release footage and stuff with games wherever I can, because I prefer to experience a game fresh myself when I go in to review it. So this is the first footage I've actually seen of this chapter, and I didn't really know too much about it other than a very short trailer when it was announced. So I haven't really been following too closely with it. But after all of this, I'm very much excited for it, and where I was fairly neutral about it beforehand, now I actively want to play it. So I'd be very interested to hear what you think in the comments. Do let me know. And also, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake as a whole. What do you think of what they did with that remake, and how much are you looking forward to the next proper chapter of it after Yuffie? Do let me know in the comments. But that is enough for this video for now. Please do like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video, because I'm sure I'll have plenty more to say about Final Fantasy VII Remake and lots of other JRPGs, so you will not miss them if you do subscribe. And if you do enjoy my work, please consider backing me on Patreon as well. You can do so for just $1 a month, and in doing so, you support this YouTube channel, what we're doing on digitallydownloaded.net with all our written work, and also you get a magazine. So for Patreon backers, again, it can be as little as $1 a month or more if you want, but everyone who supports me on Patreon gets a 48-page monthly magazine, which has a lot of original writing, and also that's very much focused on Japanese art and culture as well. So it's kind of a broad general interest magazine for anybody who's interested in Japanese games and art. So yes, that's a bonus if you support me on Patreon. Alright, I'll definitely log off now. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll see you at the next video.